The year is 1250, and you were born in England, in an era when everything was ruled by the church. You were poor, but you didn't starve. Your father drank, your mother prayed, so you were raised somewhat without love. Your father usually spent his earnings on beer. By the time you were 16, everyone in the village was talking about you. The men admired you, and the women talked among themselves about your beauty. Even a noble commander of the king came to the village and saw you, but his family demanded a dowry, and your father had already sold everything you had to pay off his debts. One night, while you were sleeping with your little sister, your father came home drunk again. "God has a plan for you, my daughter," he said. You learned what your father meant the next morning when the churchmen came to your house. They told you you were chosen. You were to be God's bride. You couldn't feel blessed. You felt sold. They cut your hair in front of everyone in the village. That hair you loved so much was gone. You wanted to scream, but you couldn't. The sound of the scissors was louder than your screams. And soon you realized that being there was actually a punishment, that piety was an excuse. The bell that rang every morning at 4 a.m. rang. You prayed until your knees swelled. The priest came to you and said, "Pain purifies the soul." You believed that for a while. After a while, you realized your soul wasn't being purified. It was just shrinking. The days passed like this. The nuns could never laugh. They walked silently, like the soul. The food was watery soup and bread hard as stone. Even dreaming was dangerous. One day, a child was brought to the monastery. He was starving, sweating. You secretly took an apple from the storeroom and gave it to him. He smiled for a moment. A small light in that gray, joyless world. But the abbot found out. "Are you stealing God's goods and feeding a vagabond?" she asked. You tried to explain, but the abbot slapped you harshly. "No food for 10 days, he said. "Let your body starve so your soul can learn to obey." For 10 days you prayed with hunger. God was silent, but it wasn't hunger. That evening, someone came, a hopeful arrival. He was a high-ranking priest from the cathedral. His cassock was shining, and he approached you with a gentle smile. He praised you. You almost believed him, until he came to your cell that night. "You have a beauty unlike any other," he said. Close the door. From that night on, you knew God didn't live within those stone walls. Candles, crosses, prayers, they were all gilded lies. But you remained silent, because it was the only way to live. Months passed, and your belly began to swell. At first you hid it. In case something happened, I might miscarry, but it didn't. The Mother Superior threw you in front of the crowd. "Confess," she said. You shook your head. "I didn't want..." He slapped you in the face. The priest shouted, "Ta, blasphemy! He's accusing the church." They forced you to your knees. They stripped you of your clothes, leaving you wearing only thin linen. They handed you a whip. "Purify your sins before God," they said. You raised the whip. Your own blood spilled onto the stone floor. They expelled you. "Leave this holy place," the abbot said, "and take your sin with you." You walked in the cold, clutching your stomach. You came to your father's door and pleaded with him. He didn't open the door. "You are no longer my daughter." You wanted to shout, "God has abandoned me." You had no voice left. Life was a cycle. You gave birth in the stable behind a tavern, the same tavern where your father had spent your dowry years before. You wrapped her in a cloth and laid her under a tree. You sat beside her and recited all the prayers you knew, but good never came. The plague came. When the plague came, you were already weak. People were falling one by one. Their skin blackened, their eyes bleeding, their breath stifled. The priests fled. The nobles locked their doors. People like you were left to die in the streets. The last thing on your mind was the wind, cold, sharp, almost tender. Perhaps this time it was God who finally remembered you, and then always darkness. They threw your body into a cart with the others. No cross, no name, no prayer. And this is your story. Born innocent, sold for drink, ruined by men who boasted of your purity, buried in silence. So if someone tells you the Middle Ages were sacred, an age dedicated to God, remind them, for women, faith was not a hope, but a punishment, and holiness was just another name for pain. That's why being a nun in the Middle Ages was awful.